1917 is directed by Sam Mendes and stars George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman as two soldiers who are sent on a mission to deliver a message to a division on the front line that basically calls off an attack that they are about to go on that could potentially save their lives and stop them from falling into an enemy trap. Now, I've been wanting to see this movie for some time now, purely because it's directed by Sam Mendes. And I've been fascinated with his work for some time now. Basically, ever since I saw American Beauty for the first time, I've kind of been interested as to whatever projects he does next, or whatever movie he decides to release. And since Spectre, I've just been kind of interested what he would do next, because after Bond, where do you really go? And the fact that he's chosen to do a World War I movie that is meant to look like one long take, I think is a pretty bold move, because after two Bond movies, you're never quite sure where that person's career is going to go. But I think he's made the right call here, and the fact that he's brought Roger Deakins back from Skyfall and Jarhead, I think is a very, very good move, because 1917 may be one of the best movies that came out last year, and it's really annoying that it didn't come out in the UK until January, because it means, one, I've seen it late, and two, I've already done my best of the year list for 2019, which means I can't add it, which is annoying. This movie, to an extent, feels like a companion piece to Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk back in 2017. They're both war movies that focus on the experience of the situation rather than getting to know these characters and relating to them in that way. That's how Dunkirk was able to make you empathise with the soldiers, by dunking you in that scenario with the soldiers. You didn't have any scenes where they talked to each other or reminisced about their lives back home. You were just plonked on the beach with these soldiers and were meant to feel the same emotions they were feeling because you were in that position as well. And 1917 does that in a completely different way, but in a way that also kind of feels very similar to Dunkirk. Like I said a minute ago, 1917 is designed to look like one continuous shot from start to end. You can kind of tell where some of the cuts are hidden throughout this movie, like when it passes by a pillar, or if it goes into darkness for a little bit, but for the most part, it pretty much consistently keeps that illusion of one long take about as effectively as Birdman did. And I think it really works here. What Roger Deakins was able to do with this movie is fucking phenomenal. The fact that he is able to make these long 8 to 10 minute long takes look as fluid as they are, whilst also keeping the movie grounded in a sense of realism which is just right for this World War I setting, just works wonders. And those two things may initially seem rather contradictory, the fact that you got this fluid camera movement and a gritty World War I setting, but actually they somewhat complement each other, but not in the way you're expecting. The fluid camera movement at times makes you feel like another soldier going along with Blake and Schofield on their mission. But that being said, there are other times where the camera can just float around the setting and just do its own thing, and it almost feels dreamlike. And that, accompanied with Thomas Newman's very ambitious score, again adds to that whole dreamlike nature of it, and I really like that whole aspect of it, because it added something else that Dunkirk didn't have. Dunkirk was a very to-the-point war movie that, again, dunked you in that scenario. And 1917, again, puts you in that position of these two soldiers, but also adds this other layer to it that kind of feels otherworldly and doesn't feel like you're watching a war movie at times. This is one of those movies where I think every technical aspect just comes together so damn well that you can't really fault it on its technical aspects, really. Like I said, the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous, and Thomas Newman's score, though it can be a tiny bit repetitive during some of the quieter moments, really works wonders during the big, bold moments that you've probably seen in the trailers. And there's one moment in particular, I won't spoil it, but it's this moment where the main characters kind of get pushed to the side and the visuals just kind of speak for themselves. And it's a really simple camera move, but that camera move mixed with Thomas Newman's score and just the way it builds up in this specific scene and the imagery that you're seeing as well just gave me goosebumps. And to be honest, this is the first movie in a while where I've genuinely felt goosebumps purely from the technical aspects of a movie alone. And it is quite special that a movie like this has done that, because like I said, this hasn't happened to me with a movie for quite some time. And the fact that 1917 was able to do that specifically in one particular moment that doesn't feature any characters at all is really impressive. Also, I have to mention George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman's performances. For the most part, a lot of people will not know who they are. I'm aware of George McKay because of the movie Pride, and he was brilliant in that. But for the most part, a lot of other people will not know who these two actors are. And the fact that this movie relies on these two people alone, and they are unknown actors, is really impressive, and they absolutely killed it. You can tell that there is a connection between the two characters, and they do get on for the most part, but there is also this sense that, like, one of them has a purpose for going on this mission, and the other one just kind of gets dragged along, and you can tell there's a bit of tension there. Like I said, this is very similar to Dunkirk in the sense that there is no one scene where they reminisce about their friends and family back home. And to be honest, in that sense, yes, the dialogue is very sparse. If anything, the second half of the movie only has really a few lines of dialogue. There is very little dialogue in the second half of the movie. But in that sense, there is actually a tiny bit more dialogue than there is in Dunkirk. And the conversations these two have are very interesting, and you do get to see who these characters were before the war, as well as how they are now, just through these one or two lines of dialogue. Again, it's not much, and they don't go into a full conversation about their lives back home, but the little snippets you do get are enough to make you feel for these characters when something drastic happens. Also, fun fact, I applied to be an extra in this movie, and I would have loved to have been in this film. But they didn't reply. So yeah, I could have been in this movie, but I didn't hear back from them. Just saying. 1917, I think, is a very special movie. I've heard some people complain about the fact that a lot of the movie is very surface level if you just look beyond the technical achievements of this film. And I can see where they're coming from, but personally, the technical achievement of this movie, combined with these two fantastic lead performances, really engrossed me into this story and this moment that this movie is trying to tell. And like I said, the technical achievements of this movie alone were enough to evoke an emotional response from me. And the fact that this movie was able to do that, I think, is really impressive. I'm going to give 1917 a 10 out of 10 because from a technical standpoint and pretty much just a filmmaking standpoint, I think it's technically flawless. There are one or two things that they maybe could have cleaned up, but to be honest, for the experience that you're going in for, I don't think they could have done any better than they did. And what Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins were able to pull off with this movie is absolutely phenomenal. So guys, that was my review of 1917. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.